You are listening to an SAFM podcast, 104 to 107 nationwide. Stream us live on www.safm.co.za or via the SABC Plus app. SABC News, independent and impartial. Sunday morning discussion on Weekend View.
Bongiwe Zwane, hope you're well. Gender-based violence is not an easy subject to deal with. I wish I had the answer to it. It often occurs when a man or young man is rejected by his girlfriend or his lover, and she just rejects him and goes for another guy. But instead of walking away, he becomes violent and takes it out on her. Sometimes with tragic circumstances, like, he even kills her. So I wish I had the answer how to end it. Errol, Durban.
Yeah, Errol, we all wish we had an answer, hey? Especially because at times you find that some of these incidences are actually happening behind closed doors. There's just so much of it currently taking place, and it really just causes one to wonder. And at the same time, I'm going to take some of your comments in just a moment, but experts at the Northwest University say there's an immediate need to raise awareness about technology-facilitated gender-based violence and femicide, and examine how digital platforms are exploited to perpetrate abuse and violence on victims. Now, they say South Africa's disturbingly high rates of gender-based violence and femicide have been exacerbated by emerging threats in the digital space. Sintleng Lihihi has more.
The scourge of gender-based violence has infiltrated the digital space, creating dangerous platforms for violence against women. Gender specialist Dr. Vedna Dainand Lala and Lifeline GBV activist Ntabiseng Khabo elaborate.
The statistics of violence against women in South Africa, GBV and intimate partner violence and femicide, has reached devastating pandemic magnitudes. And as efforts to combat this gender-based violence intensifies, so too does technology-facilitated GBVF. Over half of the girls, which is 58% surveyed from various countries worldwide, have experienced some form of online harassment and abuse, which includes stalking and threats of physical or sexual violence.
In South Africa, we had an alarming increase of gender-based violence and femicide cases, with a report of 966 murders, 1,644 attempted murders, 13,757 assault cases, and 9,309 sexual assault cases were reported within the span of 3 months. This is very shocking and alarming. And it's making a femicide rate 5 times higher than the global average, according to what Stats SA is saying.
The murders of Kaugelo Marota and Nontobe Kotele also highlight the phenomena of performative violence, Dr. Vedna Dainand Lala says.
In South Africa, performative violence refers to acts of violence that are recorded and disseminated by the perpetrator, not just merely to dominate the victim's life, but to shape and control the broader narrative surrounding this incident. And we saw this in the recent couple of weeks with the femicide of the late Kaugelo Marota. Then we had Sibusiso Lawrence, who killed his girlfriend Ntobeko Cele and confessed and posted a video about this online.
Northwest University's IT director and cybersecurity specialist, Andy Swamsi, says not all is lost if practical strategies on digital safety are implemented.
When was the last time you felt unsafe because of something online? If you're on social media, how many times do you ever share your space, your location, your personal photos, or your password? Are we teaching our young women, our students, how to spot fake dating profiles, how to spot phishing scams, how to spot deep faking manipulations?
Nsi says building digital resilience needs to be consistently practiced.
When last did you review your privacy settings, be it on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp? On TikTok, Google yourself. Have you ever Googled yourself to check what's happening, what kind of personal information that is publicly available of yourself? Also, never share intimate images. And I'm going to repeat this. Never share intimate images.
That was Director for IT and Cybersecurity Specialist at Northwest University, Andiswa Msi, and I'm Sintle Inglihihi in Mahikeng.
Thank you for that report there to my colleague, Sintle Inglihihi. Let's talk more about this now. We're joined by Dr. Natisha Dukhi, who's the Senior Research Specialist in the Public Health Societies and belonging from the Research Division at the Human Sciences Research Council. Gugu Nonjinge, Advocacy Specialist with the Center for Study of Violence and Reconciliation. A very good morning to you both, and thank you so much for your time. Dr. Dukhi, I'm going to start with you. What are the numbers telling us now as far as, GBVF is concerned in South Africa?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. So let me say, very briefly, about the prevalence of violence against women, and especially from the data that we have launched since the first National Gender-Based Violence Study that was completed last year. And so, the figures are alarming. It speaks to violence, physical and sexual. So it might be a bit confusing, but just to iron it out and to give you some of the figures. In terms of sexual violence, we had a prevalence of 33.1% of women experiencing a physical violence over a lifetime, which equated to over 7.3 million. And recent regarded as violence over the past 12 months was at 6.1, which equated to 1.3 million women reporting that. In terms of sexual violence over a lifetime, it was 9.8%, which equated to 2.1 million, and recent sexual violence at 2%, which was 432,000. And looking at physical and or sexual violence over a lifetime at 35.5%, which was roughly 7.8 million, and recent physical and or sexual violence reported at 7%, which equated to 1.5 million. However, we must know that there is still severe underreporting in the country, and we don't have, or we need to look at mechanisms of how we make this better, of how we get people who are violated to come forward and report any form of violence. And so the figures are high. It shows us even in intimate partner violence, the figures are very high, as well as non-partner violence. And these continue to escalate on a daily basis, all because of the severe underreporting, the stigmatization that, many of the sensitivity around social norms, gender norms, cultural norms that are inflicted on this.
Sure. Gugu, when one thinks about the fact that, we're not only talking about we're not saying abuse. We have to add the violent nature of it now, which is scary. One would ask, from the studies you've done as a center, what is this violence all about?
Thank you. I think I just want to add a little bit on the data bit. Yeah. And I want to very much problematize the mere fact that as a country, we definitely have a problem of official reporting. It remains inconsistent. The data that we're working with and the numbers that we're working in are numbers that are from 3 to 4 years ago, right? Even the fourth quarter crime statistics for 2024-2025 omitted disaggregated data on crimes against women and children. And you ask why, considering that we have these high levels of gender-based violence incidences that are being reported, and of which there is a significant proportion of them that are not even making it to the police stations. So it is a critical oversight that impairs policy design and accountability. So I also want to, in as much as we are saying that femicide rates remain high and GBV incidences remain high, that even exceed international averages in South Africa, there is a problem of official reporting. Even our own government doesn't have the numbers at hand. The crime stats, as I'm saying, omitted that data. So I just wanted to also just problematize that issue. When it comes to our work at CSVR, we center gender-based violence in a broader scope. of violence in South Africa. Our research identifies a number of factors that contribute to the wide nature of violence in general. And I think if we are going to look at not just abuse, but we have to speak about the different types of violences that are deeply rooted in societal norms in South Africa. We have to look at physical, we have to look at emotional, we have to look at psychological, we have to look at sexual, economic, and many other types of violence. These are the types of violence that we've found and centered and grounded in the history of violence of our country.
And right on that point, Gugu, have we normalized, violence and coupled with that, have we reached a point, because you say, underreporting, and we've been talking about this problem of underreporting for so long, and one wonders what impact does it have when the right policies must come into play, when right resources must be deployed to different areas in order to be able to fight this?
We definitely have, and that's a really a starting point in terms of the conversation, in a sense that we have a really problematic history of violence in South Africa, and we have to center it in terms of where are we coming from. The normalization of violence, especially physical aggression, that we see within relationships, the rape culture in our society, victim blaming, denial as well, and underreporting, all play a part in terms of how we normalize and how we are going to tackle violence. And these are the things that we need to start looking at. So it definitely stems from what makes up our society, the norms, the things that the societal norms that we've made normal, that are not, and how it plays out into these different forms of violence.
Let's take a break. When we come back, Dr. Dukhi, there's something else that troubles me often when we report on these statistics. It's around women who are finding themselves in vulnerable spaces. Others live with disabilities, and those particular cases sometimes go unreported en masse. But let's take a break quickly, and then we'll be back with more.
Sunday morning discussion on Weekend View.
The country has made massive progress in educating us about the gender-based violence and what are the root cause of it. We as human beings don't even have to wait for someone to tell us that what we are doing is wrong or not. At times, we also have to hold ourselves liable for some of these things. The country can only do little, but we have most to do. It's Bramoro in Bloemfontein. Good morning to you, the loyal listeners, and the team behind the beautiful show across the country.
Thank you, Bramoro. And yeah, I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. You've just mentioned something very critical that we often, don't discuss. And coming to you, Dr. Dukhi, one would ask, right, how are we looking as far as women with disabilities? Because there's also older women as well who are vulnerable. And we sometimes do say that, just a few weeks ago, I was in conversation with some elderly persons, and we were talking about the challenges they face, but some of them say that they don't want to report to these matters because maybe it might be perpetrated by someone they know, their children, or even their own grandchildren, and they wouldn't want to see them behind bars. This also adds to underreporting. Let's speak about how are things looking on that front.
Okay, yeah. So I think, you've said it right. It is very deeply concerning. And if I can speak again to the survey that was done last year, was launched last year, it's alarming figures. And I just want to quote very briefly, when we look at gender-based violence amongst, all women, and we are looking at IPV in this regard, if we do a comparison between women who are with a disability and women without a disability, very briefly, looking at physical violence, 29.3% of women who were disabled were reported as experiencing physical violence as compared to women without a disability at 21.7%. And you can see that gap there. In terms of sexual violence, 14.6% of women who were disabled reported sexual violence, while it was 7.2% for women without a disability. And sexual and non-physical violence was reported by women with a disability at 31.2% as compared to women without a disability at 23.2%. And so it speaks to the fact that, as you've correctly said, a lot of times that the perpetrator is someone known to them. And it's really alarming, and it speaks to some of the interventions that we would need to start doing and the campaigns and the highlighting of this. It speaks to the fact that when we talk about the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, there's an important and key message there that says leaving no one behind. And so in gender-based violence, we need to look at this and interrogate this more deeply. And we need to look at the fact that while we say that women, or we most often regard gender-based violence as associated with women, we need to look at all genders. We need to look at people with disabilities. We need to look at older women. We also need to look at men who have been violated. And so coming back to violence against women who are with a disability, it speaks to those norms that my colleague spoke about before the break. You know, South Africa is a society that is profoundly marked by violence, and we continue to struggle and grapple with the effects of decades of institutionalized racism, sexism, exclusion, structural violence that undermine our human development. And it also speaks to the fact that as gender-based violence is perpetuated, there's a widespread existence of gender equality and deeply entrenched in patriarchal gender norms. And these norms, unfortunately, create, legitimize, and sustain an environment in which unequal power dynamics between genders come about, such that the belief that a woman should be working in the household and that they should obey their husband or their partners becomes normalized. And so it fosters conditions that enable and justify violence against either a woman or a marginalized gender. And so these systemic inequalities manifest in various forms. So it can include economic disparity, limited access to education. It also is seen in social and cultural practices that devalue and oppress certain genders, thereby reinforcing that vicious cycle of violence. And in women with a disability, we see the fact that maybe they're unable to move, they're unable to do the everyday life experiences of a normal person, a person without disabilities. We wouldn't say a normal person, but a person without disabilities. And so, unfortunately, with people with disabilities, we see a profound level of violence because of the fact that partners know that they have this disability, feed on that disability, and it gives them that empowerment over them. And it becomes, in certain cases, it becomes a lifelong misery of violence.
So, Coco, when we think about some of the videos that we see on social media, there's one that disturbed me greatly, I think about a day or so ago, where this young man is being filmed and caught. He's beating up this woman. And the men get out of cars and they're shouting at him and they're running towards him to actually stop him. And as they're running towards him, he says, "I own her. This is my wife. You can't tell me what to do with my wife." And they all say, "What do you mean? You didn't buy her?" And it's troubling that you have some young men who still perpetuate that, something that for decades now has been tried to be fought, to say no human being owns another. And you need to be able to be educated enough as a man to know that you don't own a person.
That's very true. And I think, where are we failing? That's where we should be asking ourselves as people, or rather as institutions, who are there to combat gender-based violence or even speak about these issues in terms of the programming that we do. Our research on gender-based violence in South Africa identifies a number of several factors that contribute to this widespread problem and abuse against women. And I think at the core of it, we mentioned patriarchy and gender inequality. We mentioned socialization and cultural norms. We mentioned historical trauma. We mentioned others such as alcohol and substance abuse, of which we have to talk about when we are talking about these problems. So if we're going to unpack patriarchy and gender inequality, we have to start looking at that mindset that forced that man to say that I own her. the socialization and the cultural norms. Where is this person coming from, right? What are the cultural and societal norms that perpetuate this violence in this community, in this society, that make it acceptable for him to say what he's saying, right? So we need to use that as a departing point. Historical trauma as well plays a really big factor in this conversation. And I'm not saying historical trauma just in that society, but I think as a country as a whole, the trauma from apartheid and its intergenerational effects have contributed to the cycles of violence in our country, especially emotional distress. And it impacts how people engage in relationships and family dynamics, even in society and communities.
Sure. Let's take a break and we'll be back. I'll take some of your comments in just a moment as well. I can see them.
Sunday morning discussion on Weekend View.
All right, let me quickly take some of your comments. Madota saying, yes, women are suffering, they're killed, raped, etc. And also here that we are becoming the number one country with divorce and single mothers. And hi, Bongiwe. I think if the useless Department of Women can be done away with, it will be a win for women and prove that government listens. This portfolio is unnecessary. Can you imagine an Assistant Deputy Director General, yet with such one can't get any assistance? It's their job creation place, which plays for media publicity. Okay, I'm not sure who that comment is coming from, but it brings me back, Gugu, to then this conversation that says we often see Women's Month, dedicated month to women, and then also we are now going to go into 16 days of activism. Are these helping in the fight?
I think these campaigns and these conversations are important, and I think we mustn't reduce what they stand for. We mustn't reduce what they are here to do, right? I think now we need to be really, really targeted in terms of these interventions. I think also most of them, you find that we have women at the forefront of these conversations. And I think with CSVR, what we're saying is that gender-based violence is not a woman-only issue. It is not a woman and children only issue, but it's an everybody issue. And everyone needs to be engaged and everyone needs to be consulted on these issues, especially men. Currently and problematically so, men who are victims of gender-based violence are often left out or even underrepresented in these conversations and these campaigns. However, this needs to shift. We have to engage men. We have to have men in this discussion. And obviously, we have to use different approaches in terms of how we do this. But I think that we must not reduce the impact of these campaigns and the impact of these conversations. I think I also want to challenge us ourselves as women who are speaking about these matters to not be fazed, to be unfazed by these lunches and these high teas and these wearing pinks and whatnots, and actually engage at the core and the critical questions at hand. I think we get consumed by the beauty of it all, by how it's packaged, and I think that is problematic. It's 16 days of activism, and we must actually say what we want to say, hold perpetrators accountable, have the critical and difficult conversations in these high teas and lunches.
Yeah, it's not just about the beauty, as you say. Let me take a caller. Lala in Polokwane. Lala, good morning.
And good morning to you, listener, and to your guest. The issue concerning this Women's Month, I think there's one point that is been left for a very, very long time. In one of the cases, we see women themselves being the enablers for this thing of GBV, because you find that the women are the ones who are arranging other women so that they can be the slaves of men, or they can be harassed by men. I see this thing in most of the cases in the rural areas when they are funerals. The so-called jihad, the sisters, when the brother has passed away, the way they treat the wives of the late, it's like they are not treating another woman. So I'm thinking maybe there's another thing that it must be done. We need also to look on what are the women doing to support each other instead of them harassing each other. Thank you very much.
Sure. You took it to another level. You took it to another level, Lala. It's something that bothers me. It bothers me so much when you see a woman having lost their spouse and then the abuse that they get subjected to. And it speaks to the conversations, Dr. Dukhi, that we need to have, which are honest, because what he's raising, it's something that challenges a lot of us.
Absolutely, and I fully agree. I think, as my colleague has said, even when we are talking about gender-based violence, why wait for 16 days of activism only? We need to be moving from that pretty frills into, concerted actions. And it speaks to the fact that if we want to intervene, if we want to get things right in the country, then there's a whole lot of things that we need to do. For a woman who's just lost a spouse and then to be facing abuse, it's not uncommon in South Africa. And that's a sad reality that we need to start changing. And we need to, as he said correctly, is what are we as women doing? We need to challenge ourselves. We need to start asking those questions. If we see someone being violated as the scenario you presented earlier, are we going to stand with our cell phones and be taking videos to upload on TikTok to get likes and views? Or are we going to intervene and do something about it? Are we going to, when we have our kids even at home, are we going to, favor the boy child over the girl child and say, no, you're a boy, so, it's okay? Or are we going to stand up and say, as mothers, as sisters, as aunts, that, no, you are wrong, and that's not the way you behave towards a girl? Those norms that have been there and entrenched in the South African system for so long, for decades now, need to be unpacked. And so it takes us to bear that question, for example, talking about older women as well. Why does a gogo have to live in fear if she's living alone? Or why does she have to still live in fear because her grandson might attempt or has raped her? This shouldn't be the case. Women shouldn't have to be walking around in South Africa nervous and always looking over their shoulders and worrying about who the next person is to violate them. And so we need to do better. And this is an urgent call, I think, if we want to campaign about this, if we want to take it to the next level, is that if we as women don't stand together and we are not supporting each other, how can we expect others to do so?
Yeah.
And also when a woman is being violated, or we know that she is being violated, is to not, go into these spasms of questions asking about what was she wearing or, whatever. Violence is always violence, and it's a non-negotiable. It's that the way that we address it is the way we would with any person, whether it's a child, whether it's a gogo, whether it's somebody in a smart suit, or whether it's someone in a short skirt. And the same goes for violence with men, I think. It's today is the end of Women's Month.
Yeah.
And as we go through that, I think if we want to tackle this in a concerted way, then we also need to look at why are men perpetrating? What drives them to perpetration?
Yeah. And that is the big question. That is the big question. And thank you so much to you both for your time. It's such an important conversation. One would even want to have it the whole day. But that was Dr. Natisha Dukhi, Senior Research Specialist in the Public Health Societies and belonging to the Research Division at the Human Sciences Research Council, Gugu Nonjinge, Advocacy Specialist with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation.
You can find SAFM Current Affairs on 104 to 107 nationwide. Our podcasts are available for download on all our digital platforms. SAFM, leading the conversation.